This week we take flight on episode number 747 with Andy Robbins, product architect of Bloodhound Enterprise for Spectre Ops. He'll talk about the origin story behind Bloodhound, as well as where the project is today and where it's going in the future. Andy will also share his current research surrounding Azure attack paths. In the security news, Raspberry Pi Pico W adds wireless. Apple expands commitment to protect users from mercenary spyware. UK health authorities slammed for WhatsApp use in the pandemic. 3 UEFI firmware flaws found in tens of Lenovo notebook models. Also, we'll talk about some other trickery. I almost said F word there. Trickery by Lenovo actually uncovered that Microsoft's third-party CA for signing updates for Secure Boot will be disabled by default in recently shipped Lenovo laptops with Secure Boot, and lots of other firmware, a couple other firmware-related stories. Hacking a drone takeover via Express LRS protocol will be covered. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Every hack follows the same pattern. First, hackers exploit a human error, like a leaked key or a secret left in code. They gain a foothold and then pivot, moving from one compromised system to the next. Teleport breaks this cycle. Open source Teleport gives every engineer, every piece of hardware, every application an identity, replacing secrets like passwords and keys with auto-expiring identity-based certificates. Learn why most visionary businesses in the world choose Teleport at securityweekly.com/teleport.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who's familiar with the burning sensation of a mouthful of whiskey healing his soul, Mr. Paul Sidoria.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 747, recorded on July 13th, 2022, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, where I'm joined by none other than Mr. Larry Pesce to my left.
Woo-hoo.
What's going on, dude?
It's been a couple hot minute weeks and vacation and teaching.
I know,
and stuff.
yeah, but summer gets a little busy. We're in the midst of summer.
Yep.
You know,
vacation time.
I accidentally drank holy water with my laxative, and
holy shit!
I know. Well, no, I'm about to start a religious movement.
Yeah, that you are.
Lee Neely will be joining us for the next segment. In the meantime, make sure you don't miss any of your favorite Security Week content. I know it's been a little delays on the feed, but those are being resolved. So new episodes are coming out, and we're getting caught up on the backlog. So if you visit securityweekly.com/subscribe, you can subscribe to all the shows, have those new episodes downloaded right to your device. You can join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media, as well as our streaming platforms, as well as check out on securityweekly.com/subscribe. There's like a best of, we call them episode starter packs. I don't know, Larry, have you seen these?
No.
You have to go check them out. So I went into the archive, like not the way back archive, but like the kind of more recent archive. Like there's some cutoff points in there, right? And I curated some playlists on Spotify of like what I thought were really cool episodes, big name guests, that kind of stuff. So you can find all those if you go to securityweekly.com/subscribe, especially if you use Spotify. You can add the playlist to your Spotify account and go listen to those.
It's awesome.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
It's awesome. You should totally go back and listen to episode number 2.
No.
If you can make out the audio.
Don't. I see. Yeah, that's going way too far.
I still laugh about that every time. Hey, Andy, why'd you take off the headphones?
Oh, God.
Oh, because I couldn't hear anybody over the air conditioner. Audio engineer Andy.
Yeah. We have an Andy with us today. Joining us today is Andy Robbins, the product architect of Bloodhound Enterprise. Andy is the co-author of Bloodhound, a tool designed to reveal the hidden and unintended permission relationships in Active Directory domains. He has performed numerous red team operations and penetration tests against banks, credit unions, healthcare providers, defense organizations, and other Fortune 500 companies across the world, all with permission, of course. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Hey, thanks for that welcome. And I liked the tie-in that you had with episode 747 that would you say we're flying in to the episode? I like that.
Coming in hot. Andy, how did you get your start in information security?
So it all started on AOL for me back in the 90s. So I was born in 85. And so when I was about 11 years old, would have been about 1996, that was AOL version 3.5, I think, is what was current at that time. And so I was immediately hooked on AOL when I first, had an account set up, or when my dad first set up our account for our family.
You got one of those CDs free in the.
Oh man! I had the spindle that I turned into a lamp. Like I had the whole deal. Like you go to Blockbuster, you
with more free minutes than
dozens of them
was available in a month, type of thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm on AOL right now. I'm still using my free minutes to talk to you right now.
I actually wouldn't be surprised.
So I got hooked on AOL. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it, and that became a problem. And so my grades in school started to go down, and my parents gave me a little bit of tough love, and they canceled our AOL subscription.
Oh no!
Well,
no.
That didn't really work out that well for me. So I had to figure out like how do I maintain access to AOL, like keep talking to my friends and all that kind of stuff. And then I found out that there was this whole community all about, let's say, maintaining, let's say,
statute of limitations has passed here.
Surprise guest access to legitimate accounts. Let's say
surprise guest access. Okay, yes, I understand.
Yeah,
I think we call it account takeover. Well, I guess not maybe takeover.
No, that's surprise guest access.
Surprise guest access.
Yes.
Yeah. So I got involved in the AOL scene that way and learned all about phishing, all about like cloning web pages, learned like the very, very basics of HTML and CSS, like how to make a web page look convincing so that if I'm trying to convince somebody to put information into it that they shouldn't, that
like
they will.
You mean like their AOL username and password?
For surprise guest access?
Your friends were doing that. Your friends were doing that.
I heard about some people doing this.
We used to refer to that as our friend Bob. Our friend Bob was the one.
You read about it on AOL.
Yes.
You read about it on
exactly,
AOL.
Yeah. So there was a whole world all around that. So I was in that for, let's say, about 3 or 4 years until we finally just got DSL, and there wasn't really a need for having a dial-up account to AOL anymore.
Surprisingly, no one got arrested.
He didn't say that.
Some people may have gotten arrested. Right. Not me, but some people may have gotten arrested.
Maybe not just for that too, right? Yeah.
There's also the whole thing about like coming up to the age of 18 and like you're no longer a minor. It's like, okay, maybe it's time to like calm down with things like this. So
then you got what they termed back then is high speed internet, but the term high speed is relative to dial-up internet. So just throwing that out there our youngins in the audience.
Oh yeah.
And before we get too much further, I think Andy's the first person to ever admit on the show that they got their start in information security because of AOL.
Mm.
I loved it, man.
Awesome.
I loved it. There are some other people I know of who were also around at that time. I don't have permission from them to name them, but we're around.
Yeah.
The AOL, there's some of us around.
Scene, the AOL gang.
Yeah.
Do you have like regular meetups at DEF CON or something?
Oh yeah, the former AOL hackers party at the Chili's off Strip. Oh man, you got to see it to believe it.
The badge is an AOL CD with 3 minutes on it.
Oh, you're onto something there. Yeah. So I learned at the time things that I didn't really understand were what today we refer to as like tactics and techniques and procedures.
Right.
So how do I craft a fish? How do I send a fish? How do I edit a binary so that the password stealing binary sends the password for this user to my ICQ number and not the ICQ number that was programmed into it when it was compiled, right? So like, how do I use a hex editor for that? And at the time, it was just like, I want to be on AOL and I want to talk to my friends. So these are the things I need to do in order to do that. So I didn't really understand it to be like anything security related, or like I don't think any of us really called it hacking.
Do your parents know today like what they created by taking away? Because maybe if they had not, like if we go in a time machine and they go back and they had not cut off your access and you could just talk to your friends, you wouldn't have become a hacker at that time that way, right? You probably would have become the hacker you are today with permission and stuff, but you might have taken a different path, right?
Totally, yeah. Who knows? Actually, what's funny about that is, after I became an adult, I tried to do a totally different career field that had nothing to do with computers whatsoever. Did that for a while, determined, I don't really like doing this. I took a year off. Well, I was working, but I took a year to like really focus on like, what do I want to dedicate the rest of my life to? Or like the foreseeable, decades of my life. What do I want to focus on? And I remembered back to my AOL days, like how much I loved doing all that stuff to make a computer do things that it is not supposed to do, or make people do things with a computer that they're not supposed to do, right? And then I found out that there was this whole career field called information security. I found out there was this specialty called penetration testing. And this would have been in about 2009 when I was looking into all this stuff for the first time.
You said you did something different before you delved back into cybersecurity. What was that something different, Andy?
So I was getting into videography and photography.
Yeah, cool.
And like live event production.
Nice.
Didn't like it. Wasn't for me. Met a lot of great people in that world, and still keep contact with them, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't the thing that I would be willing to make sacrifices in my life to be as good at it as I could be, the way that I feel about the field that we work in, right? I feel that way about our field.
So then you had to come back into cybersecurity. How did you get back into cybersecurity after you did some, or your friends showed you a bunch of AOL hacking stuff, we'll say, right?
Yeah.
You did some videography stuff, but then you got to get back into cybersecurity. What was your path?
Yeah, so actually it goes back to AOL. One of my good friends on there was one of the folks I was doing all this kind of stuff with. I chatted with him and I said, hey, I found out about this career field. Do you know anything about it? And he was like, as a matter of fact, the company I work at is trying to start up a pen test team right now. Do you want to join? So it was definitely a right place, right time, knowing the right person situation for me. So
but
I feel very fortunate that I got that connection.
At this time, Andy, you had very little experience pen testing other than what your friends showed you that you dabbled in, right?
Yeah, zero. Like the last time that I did something, let's say, illegitimate with a computer would have been in like 1999. Wow. And so that would like 10 years had passed. And so, yeah, my experience was zilch. It was zero. I did have some like help desk experience that I had put in at a university that I was going to for a minute. But otherwise, like I was coming at it almost blank, just with that experience that I had when I was a young teenager.
Wow. So they really took a chance on you. So what kind of stuff did they give you in the beginning?
Right. So this company, it was primarily a small business managed services provider. So in the Tri-Cities in Washington State. And so what that meant was, maybe there's like a title and loan company, maybe there's a paint company, maybe there's a dentist office, whatever. They don't want to pay for a full-time IT person, so they shop that out to a company like an MSP. And so my days were like billing hours. I spent an hour at this dentist office and I was doing password resets or setting up SMB share access or whatever. Then I drove across town. I did 2 hours over here setting up a bunch of MFPs. And then I went over here to respond to a company's email server being put on the SMTP spam house blacklist, and like triaging that and figuring that out for them. Like spent 3 hours doing that. So the day would be like
they threw you to the wolves.
All kinds of things.
They threw you to the wolves.
Totally, yeah.
I mean that's
it's totally baptism by fire.
Yeah, and that's a way to learn. Certainly, I mean it's a pretty hard.
For
way
me,
to
it
learn.
was.
Yeah, I mean for anyone.
Yeah, for me it was.
That's amazing.
So like the days were spent doing break fix, soup to nuts, sysadmin, help desk stuff for all kinds of different places. And then in my evenings, I would go to a Hastings. You know what Hastings is?
No, what is Hastings?
Sounds familiar.
It's like comic books, DVDs. Okay. They have a little cafe in some of their locations.
Sure.
Yeah. So I would go to the cafe at Hastings from like 6 p.m. until about 10 p.m. with my Metasploit Unleashed book, just trying to teach myself Metasploit, which at the time was like, that seems like a thing to learn. And, throwing MSO 8067 at a lab, standing up a lab, like just trying to figure out the moving parts and, how do I actually do this? The thing is that company where, hey, we're going to stand up this pen test team, it sold 6 months after I had joined. So, and that promise or that vision of a pen test team being set up there disappeared. So then my focus really shifted to like, all right, I'm going to spend some time. I'm going to spend like a good year and a half, whatever, like doing my sysadmin help desk thing, get some skills, get some time under, behind me, and then really focus on trying to find a full-time pen test job. The first full-time pen test job I found it on Craigslist.
Huh? What?
And so I keep in mind this would have been in like the year 2010.
Yeah,
and I was coming at this.
People found sexual predators and serial killers on Craigslist. You found a job.
Yeah, yeah. It turned out to be a pretty legitimate job, I would say. Yeah. So what can I say about that? I was there for a couple of years, and it was the same thing. It was like take advantage as much as possible of being able to do pen testing with permission, and then then try to like move on to bigger and better things when the time comes, when it's appropriate. And
that's really sorry, I was just pausing it because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like many folks struggle to break into pen testing early in their career, but you seem to have kind of cut your teeth. Is that, do you think, just a time thing? Like there was so few pen testers back in 2009, 2010 that company took a chance, and then you had some experience pen testing, so then from there you could kind of start moving up the ladder, whereas today it's really hard to break into that.
Yeah, somebody I talked to very early on is a guy named Jeremy Kennelly, and so he's working at Mandiant. He's been there for a while. I was talking to him back in 2010, and I was trying to just get some insights from him as far as like, hey, I'm new to the field. This is what I want to do. Do you think this career track that I found from some source, looks legitimate? And this career track was all about like, get this certification and then this certification and then this certification, and then you'll have this job and then this job and then this job. And then in 10 years, you'll be a pen tester. And surely, like the certification discussion, that's a Pandora's box, right? But in talking with him about this, he basically told me like, I wouldn't worry about all that. Get a certification that will get you past the HR filter, but then come at a job with as much practical experience as you possibly can. And so that's what I focused on. Also, in 2010, I would have been, 25 years old, I think. So I had this pressure internally that I felt like I was playing catch up. And so I didn't feel like I wanted to wait, and go through the, year after year after year, like wait however many years and then get a CISSP and then try to be a pen tester. Like that didn't make any sense to me. So I set the goal, like I'm going to be a pen tester no matter what. And it's going to happen in the next, year and a half, whatever. That is probably like what led me to looking for a job on Craigslist as opposed to a more classically like legitimate job board. Found the job, did the job for 2 years, I think, at that organization. And then after 2, maybe 3 years at that organization, moved on to Verus Group, ATD at Verus Group, where most of the people who I work with now are people who formed Spectre Ops.
Gotcha.
13 of us back in 2017 now.
So how did you come to get the idea for Bloodhound?
Yeah, so man. So I mean, let's go back to the beginning, I feel like. and kind of set the stage, because really the inspiration for this tool came out of a big problem that we felt that we and other pen test teams had. So I started pen testing in earnest in let's say 2012, maybe even 2013. So MSO 8067 is still around. Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon to find in 2012, 2013.
I mean, that was the gift that kept on
not
giving.
To find right now.
That was a gift kept on giving for quite some time.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's like you get a shell or you get physical access to a network. You find a system with, it's missing MSO 8067. You get a shell, and then you combine that with the fact that most organizations were running and are still running Active Directory. And at that time, the RID 500 or another local admin account built in to the system, that account would have the same credential across the entire enterprise.
Oh,
that was the situation for many networks.
Those were the days,
so you deploy an interpreter to 3,000 systems to find a system that has had a domain admin log into.
Right.
Exactly.
Because you had local admin.
Ask me how I know this, right? This is the problem we used to have.
Was it was it Laps? Laps was Microsoft's
Laps was the solution from Microsoft to that problem. Yeah. There were some organizations are doing like they were home rolling their own solutions to this, which had problems, let's say.
Yeah. Microsoft. Well, by problems you mean administrative nightmares, most likely.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, administrative nightmares. But also, some of those home-rolled solutions would change the local admin password on the system using a binary that came from a network share that anybody could read, and that binary, if you get to the intermediate language of that binary, you could see like the algorithm is even too generous. Like you could see the lines of code it was using to generate the password for that account. And then you could just turn that into the password for the local admin account on every system in the network. So critical flaws in home rolled solutions that we would see on all kinds of networks. Laps changed everything as far as, in 2012, I get a shell, I throw MSO 8067, I throw it across 3,000 other systems with my local admin password, which is the same across every system. Not even the password, just the NTLM hash.
I was going to say, so you passed the hash back in the day.
Exactly.
Yep.
Pass the hash. Yep. Get a shell everywhere. Find a system that has a domain admin logged on, and you're done. It's just so easy. Like it was like
easy, except for searching through those 3,000 systems.
Sure.
Yeah, that was the tough part. It was like the tough part was like, are you gonna grep through the logs, or are you going to awk through the logs?
Or combination of both works great.
Well, so you have a problem, and then you use awk to solve it, and then you've got two problems.
Yeah.
So
Laps comes out, and that changes the entire dynamic. And I remember at the time on Twitter,
but not overnight though, Andy. Right? Like Laps took organizations some time to adopt. I would say.
Yeah. It took time for sure, and still there are organizations that have not deployed Laps. Which I would say, if there is one thing you take away from this, deploy Laps right now as soon as possible. It is amazing. It is, in my opinion, one of the best security products Microsoft has ever put out. So I remember the chatter, though, at that time when Laps adoption started to, let's say, get bigger, and more organizations are using it. They're using it effectively. The chatter at that time was like, "Oh my God, like things have changed so drastically that like pen testing is over. Pen testing is over because the local admin password is not going to be the same. We can't just pass the hash anymore and repeat the same password across every device. Like it's over." Obviously, it was not over, but it did introduce pretty significant challenges that it just meant that we had to change our tactics as far as how we turned initial access into a network into domain admin. And at that time, our team and a whole lot of other teams independently all kind of arrived at the same solution to that problem, which was let me start at the end of my attack path, which is domain admin or a domain controller or whatever. And let me start going backwards. So my domain admins, okay, I can see that they're logged onto these systems here using PowerView. Okay, those systems, who are the local admins on those systems? Okay, these are the local admins on those systems. Okay, where are those people logged on? And just repeat that over and over and over and over and over until eventually you would wind up finding a system that you have either already compromised, or that like a user you had compromised was a local admin on, or that like the domain users group had been added to the local admins on. And then you just follow the breadcrumb trail up to the domain admin. And this process, we called it derivative local admin. Microsoft, in a research paper they put out in 2009, called it identity snowball attack. Some people called it the credential shuffle. Went by a whole lot of different names, but it was the same thing.
You could have called Bloodhound like the snowball shuffle, given that those pieces of data, Andy.
As opposed to the truffle shuffle, which is something completely different.
Oh, yeah. So that was the problem that we were facing, was like, we have this very reliable but very, very tedious tactic that we can use to become domain admin basically anywhere. It took forever to do.
It relied on a ton of enumeration,
yes,
and then a ton of research inside of that enumerated data to follow those pathways to domain admin. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So the problem was we were lousy with data, but we lacked the right tools to exploit that data effectively. And at that time, we were putting the data into Splunk, and we were trying to tell Splunk, like, help me, right. Like a very naive approach, right? We even tried like Excel pivot tables, for God's sakes.
I see. So what you're saying is like, I can write the tool to enumerate all that data, but we were lousy at analyzing that data to identify the correct attack paths.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was having a conversation with a good friend named Sam Briesemeister, and I was explaining this problem to him, and he told me, this is graph theory. This is a problem that you can solve with graphs.
Right.
And he explained to me, the moving pieces of a graph, like this is what a vertex is, this is what an edge is. And at the time, I'm like, you're speaking Greek to me. I have no clue what you're saying, because I didn't get a computer science degree. This is my first introduction to graph theory. But maybe 2 months later, Rohan Vazirker, Will Schroeder, and we produced a POC from PowerView and some other stuff, where we could take data from PowerView, put it into a graph database, analyze it with a GUI front end, and do what you just said, Paul, which was like have the computer do the analysis for us to tell us where the path is and how to execute it. And the first network that we successfully proved the very, very pre-alpha version of Bloodhound with was this giant global conglomerate organization with an enormous Active Directory forest with more than 100 domains with like super complicated trust relationships and everything.
Did you say more than 100 Active Directory domains?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah. Quite a bit more. And our team at Verus Group, there were a lot of extremely good operators at Verus Group, like Will Schroeder, Justin Warner, Matt Nelson, Steve Borsch, like some of the best operators I've ever seen in my career. And
by operators, you mean pen testers?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this network was so difficult and so complex that repeatedly it was the one network that over and over and over and over and over, our team just basically had no success in whatsoever. Couldn't even get domain admin in one domain, let alone enterprise admin at the forest root. Just couldn't do it for lots of different reasons. So once we had the proof of concept for like the pre-alpha of Bloodhound, we ran it in this customer network. We found an attack path, executed the attack path. That attack path took us through, if I recall correctly, 7 different domain trust relationships, all the way up to us being one step away from compromising the one and only enterprise admin account in the forest. And then we just ran out of time. But we knew exactly what to do next. And comparing that to us having no success whatsoever, engagement after engagement after engagement, we knew that we had something special, and we knew that we wanted to put a lot of our free time into developing it and put a lot of our research time that Veris Group gave us at the time into it. And then later that year in 2016, we released it at DEF CON on stage, and very famously, Rohan had to unlock his password safe database on stage to turn the repo from private to public, which was a funny moment.
I thought you were going to say you threw meat out into the crowd. That was a different DEF CON presentation.
Yeah. That's a legendary one.
Yes. No, that's amazing, dude. How you didn't have a lot of programming experience before you delved into this.
Let's say I still don't really have any programming experience. I am not a programmer.
That's encouraging to our audience, right? That there are varying degrees of programming. I separate program from like a software engineer / developer, right? Like I think there's certainly many different types, folks that write software at different levels for different purposes. But you had a problem to solve, and you need to write some code to do it.
I'll tell you, I used to feel really insecure about that. And I used to have these really negative feelings about myself that anytime somebody would say I'm an ideas person, I always felt like, oh my God, that's kind of me, because maybe I'll have an idea, but I can't really execute it. So I used to feel really insecure about that. I used to feel a lot of imposter syndrome about that. But then I realized that it's okay. It's okay to have ideas that I as a non-programmer, I can use PowerShell and maybe some PowerShell to create a proof of concept that works well enough to prove the idea out. And then somebody else who is more passionate, more skilled, more experienced with formal programming or formal software engineering can take that and make it way better than my initial proof of concept. So being the ideas guy, I don't have a problem with anymore. I think it's okay. I think it's okay to have ideas, have a proof of concept that works well enough, and then let somebody else. I feel so lucky, because I feel like the very, very first proof of concept of Bloodhound I showed to the team at Veris Group, and Rohan immediately was like, I want to build that. And so Rohan totally built the GUI for Bloodhound all by himself. And, of course, rewrote the data collection capability into SharpHound. I had nothing to do with writing SharpHound, and I have that much to do with the code in the SharpHound or the Bloodhound GUI. So I've been very, very fortunate to have an idea, make a proof of concept that's good enough, and then have other people who are better at programming than I am come and help and work on that, along with me.
Andy, and I think you're spot on. I've talked to a lot of amazing people that have done just that. That are I have this idea, and it's really hard for me to explain how I want to see that implemented. I'm not I didn't get a CS degree. I'm not a hardcore software engineer kind of person, but I can understand enough code to write a proof of concept and then hand that off to people who love writing code and designing software and have gone to school, maybe not going to school, but are just awesome at that. That's what they love, and turn it into something totally amazing. But they get the vision, because you didn't just draw it on, pictures on a whiteboard. You actually here's a proof of concept, and I think that's a really great middle ground and an awesome way to do that. I mean, I don't want to out Dave Kennedy, but I remember Dave Kennedy explaining to me that he's done that with some of his team members, and I'm like, dude, I do the same thing as well. Maybe I'll write some Python code. I'm like, I don't have time to turn this into what I feel the vision is, but here's a proof of concept. Go turn that into something amazing, right?
Right. Totally. I think the key there is something that this guy named Ken Kashenda talks about, which is having a high fidelity demo.
Right.
So if you have a high fidelity demo that you can externalize and put outside of your mind and point at and talk to about someone, you can talk about it objectively. And the example that Ken talks about in his book is, if I described for you the cutest puppy that you have ever seen in your life, and it's got the cutest little tail, and it's got the cutest little ears and the cutest little nose, and you just want to snuggle with it, the idea that I have in my mind right now of what that puppy looks like probably has nothing to do with the image of a puppy that you have in your mind, right? Or that Larry has in his mind, or that a listener has in their mind. So even though we're talking about the same concept, our manifestation of that, or our visualization of that, couldn't be more different. Like maybe I'm imagining a dachshund puppy and Larry's imagining, a Rottweiler puppy or whatever.
Actually, it was a golden retriever, but that's,
Oh, there you go.
See?
Yeah.
Well, to your point exactly.
Yeah. But having something that you can point at, that you can look at, even if it is just a mock-up on a piece of paper, as high fidelity as possible, you can work with that. You can talk about it. You can move things around, and you can work way more effectively with somebody else because you're actually talking about the same thing. You're not talking about the concept I have in my mind versus the concept you have in your mind. Right.
So what was the progression from there? You guys were working for, what was the V company?
Verus Group.
We were, yeah.
And then, but now there's Spectre Ops. What was that?
Yeah.
Progression like?
Right. So Verus Group was sold to Coalfire.
Okay.
And at the time, and I think this might be true as well, as Coalfire was owned by the Carlyle Group. So at that time, I and some other people, we felt that we wanted to kind of, let's say, not do that. Didn't want to be a part of that. And some of us started to look for other opportunities at other places, which was really hard because the team culture that we had at the at Verus Group on our team at ATD was it was really special to all of us. And I think that's true for a lot of pen test teams that are smaller than a certain number of people. Like there's a really, really special, like early days feel to a team like that. We wanted to keep that going. We wanted to have control of our working culture. And so losing that control was hard. Then Spectre Ops was started by Raphael Mudge, the architect, or the former architect and creator of Cobalt Strike. And he invited some people to join that organization. And some of the people he invited to join were some of us from the ATD team who had, had our eyes, looking at other opportunities that may have been out there. When the company started, it was 13 people. And so I was one of those original 13 people. And that was in 2017. And now, man, I feel like I'm probably going to give the wrong number of the current number of people we have at Spectre Ops, but I feel like it's about 70. I think it's about 70 people. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong, but it's about 70. And it has been great.
Oh, that's good to hear.
It has been great. Also, we are hiring.
That was a great shameless plug right there, Andy.
There you go.
Are you hiring who do you hire? Pen testers primarily?
Developers?
Both?
Both. All the above. Yeah. So we're hiring developers. We're hiring pen testers. We're hiring defensive people. So if you're in a SOC, if you're a threat hunter, if you're writing Yarrow rules, we want to talk to you. We're also hiring, administrative staff. And then on my team, on the Bloodhound Enterprise team, we're hiring customer success and sales type people.
So wait, you said Bloodhound Enterprise. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we put out FOSS Bloodhound in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
FOSS, free and open source software Bloodhound, right? So FOSS Bloodhound is created by red teamers for red teamers, right? Oh, my battery and my camera just died.
Oh,
that's fun.
Okay. That was your...
Wow.
I thought it was our cameras. I thought it was our cameras for a moment there.
That's exciting.
Exciting. You keep using that word.
Maybe it will not die now.
There you go.
He's back.
He's back.
So we put out FOSS Bloodhound in 2016. It's free and open source by red teamers for red teamers. Bloodhound, as long as I am in control of Bloodhound, it will be free and open source forever. As long as I'm in control of the project, it will be free and open source forever. When we put out Bloodhound in 2016, we knew at the time, and a whole lot of other people knew at the time, that while the offensive security use case for this technology was very compelling and very interesting, the real exciting possibilities were on the defensive side. So Bloodhound made the problem of attack paths very clear and very easy for people to understand in their own networks. But it doesn't solve the problem of attack paths as effectively as it could. Bloodhound Enterprise is that solution. It's our attempt to help organizations solve that problem of the prevalence, growth, and difficulty of resolving, seeing, and measuring those attack paths in an enterprise network.
So there's a defensive component for Bloodhound, and that's Bloodhound Enterprise. Is that what I gleaned from that, Andy?
Yeah, FOSS Bloodhound is by red teamers for red teamers, and so you can get defensive value out of FOSS Bloodhound, and we've written up some blog posts to that effect. Bloodhound Enterprise is for defenders, and so everything about it is totally about the defensive use case for this technology or for this methodology. And so there are some things that are very different between FOSS and Enterprise. And the reason for any difference is all about we are trying to help people get as much defensive value as possible out of this thing.
That's awesome. So what's the future of Bloodhound?
Yeah, so there are stories, since I've been in this field, which would have let's say 2012 is really kind of when I started. So in the past 10 years,
like fables, like stories.
Sure, yeah, like maybe lessons learned, like maybe cautionary tales, where maybe somebody has this cool free and open source software that then they want to capitalize on. And so they totally get rid of, nuke the FOSS version of that. The FOSS version, you can't get it anymore. The documentation is gone. All you can find of it nowadays is, some conference talk maybe, but you're going to have to pay up if you want to be part of it, right? We've seen, I think y'all can probably think of some good examples there.
Yep.
I certainly can, but I don't want to name names. I think we've all seen examples of how that goes south, not only for the users of that software, which is, in my opinion, what's most important, but also for the producers of that software in the form of reputation damage, loss of trust in people who are behind the software. And, I haven't really seen a good example myself of somebody taking something that used to be free, turning it totally, into something that you have to pay for, that there is no free component. I haven't seen a good example of somebody doing that in a way that has resulted in a positive outcome for everybody involved. The people who make the software and the people who use the software. So we didn't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
I think having a free version is key. And I think that Nessus was an interesting use case that I was very close to. I worked for Tenable. And I think it's a really interesting use case to explore. I mean, they still have a free component today, kind of to your point, Andy. Like, there are different circumstances that I think drive people to do what they did in terms of that.
Sure.
Having people contribute back to your open source project is one of those determining factors as to what happens to that open source project, right?
Totally.
I also like to applaud AHD more, right, for that flipping to a BSD license for Metasploit to ensure that it's free and open and people can use it and even include it inside of products and still use it, right? Which is, again, it's such a different path, but that's where the circumstances and the decisions of those authors of that original open source software led them to. I support them in both those examples I gave. I support them, 100%. I think you're right. There are many other examples where sometimes it went right and sometimes it went wrong, right? And there's hundreds of other projects, I think, specifically in security that have maybe gone down the wrong path for the wrong reasons. Sometimes, in some cases, I'm like, that's really it's upsetting, right? Because I think there was a community there that maybe could have been fostered right. Maybe there was an opportunity to go commercial but keep a free component, right? There was different kind of paths, but taking something free and then making it not free, just like two very extreme examples, doesn't always go so well, right?
Yeah, one of the things that Raphael Mudge had me do early on is he had me put together a business plan for this idea of a commercial version of Bloodhound. And as part of that business plan, I was researching these things, like what have other people done in the past with something that was free that they wanted to capitalize on? There are great rewards for capitalizing on this thing. Not the least of which is that the FOSS component can benefit from legitimate software engineers actually being behind the project, right? But in doing that research, as far as, people who have some kind of free components, people who have some kind of commercial component, there was a quote that I ran across, and I can't remember exactly who it was. I feel like maybe it was Larry Ellison regarding Java, or maybe it was a quote regarding Red Hat. Maybe Java's not the best example, but the sentiment is going to be the same, which the quote was something to the effect of, if we give people an excellent enough experience for free, then enough of those people will choose to become paying customers that we can have a viable business. So that's basically what it comes down to. You mentioned like having a community, like having the Bloodhound Slack. It gives us a chance to like interact one-on-one with our users, like instantaneously and very easily. That feedback from users is gold for a product architect. What are people struggling with? What are people wanting? What are the problems that we're not solving for people that we want to say yes to? Yes, we will solve that problem for you.
Right, but the double-edged sword there is the times where you have to say no, where people are requesting something where you're like, wow, that could be a lot of work for a really small percentage of the user base. And those are the more difficult decisions, right? Where you got to say no.
Absolutely. We've said no to a lot. And I think one of the things that we have said no to the most maybe is including like vulnerability scan data in our data, in our graph schema. So like this computer is missing this patch or whatever, right? So we have said no to that over and over and over and over and over because it's enough work for us to make sure that the data collection for our current scope works and works effectively and it works consistently. I can't even imagine the pain of doing, like credentialed vuln scan programmatically and keeping that up to date. Like that's an entire army of developers that have to be
I worked in that industry.
Assigned to that.
There's 3 public companies in that space that employ huge, well-funded research teams to do that today.
Yeah.
You know what? I agree with your decision.
They do that better than we are ever going to do that. Tenable does vuln scanning better than we ever will. We're never going to do vuln scanning ever. We will cooperate with our data being available to a customer so that they can marry up vuln scan data with like a SOAR platform, for example.
Sure.
But we're going to focus on what we think we can do best.
Yeah, your job is enumeration, man. It's not I wouldn't use Bloodhound for vuln scanning, right? I mean, not to,
totally.
I don't want to take anything away from those users that are requesting it, right? Obviously, they've got a use case in their mind, and I don't fault them for that, right? But you got to stick to what your goal is for your product.
Use the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, and we defined it when we first started talking about Bloodhound in this interview, right? Like, it's enumeration of your Active Directory environment, and that's the power of it, right? Like, what else really does that? But I don't know anyone talk about competition and stuff, right? But when anyone talks about enumerating your Active Directory, I'm like, well, Bloodhound does a really good job of that.
Yeah. So I think earlier you were talking about, like, where is the project going? And so, we have this FOSS product, Bloodhound, and we have a commercial product, Bloodhound Enterprise. We decided we don't want to get rid of the FOSS version. We want to make that free, open source, forever for anybody to use. As we have grown the Bloodhound Enterprise team, we've got almost 20 people full time just focused on Bloodhound Enterprise at Spectre Ops.
How does that make you feel today?
So blessed and lucky, and like a sense of responsibility as well, that I need to be taking the steps and making the moves that are benefiting the people who have said yes to working on our team.
Yeah,
right?
It's amazing.
So our responsibility to those people.
It sounds like the open source version more for red teamers and the enterprise version more for blue teamers. Is that a too simplistic of an analogy? Or
no, that's exactly right. Okay. That's exactly right. Now, the thing is, while the UX is pretty different, like the features in enterprise, you really wouldn't recognize them from the open source product.
Right.
The technologies that actually create that UI or that manage the database or whatever, like what we are doing now is we are trying to take advantage as much as possible as we can of the engineering talent that we have on our team to benefit both products. And to that end, we are going through the process now of merging those code bases together.
Yeah.
And so engineering effort on the enterprise product directly contributes to the FOSS product. Now, of course, there are features in the defensive product that will not be available in the free product, of course.
But it's a different audience. And I think, and I could be wrong, but in my experience, that's pretty unique to have an open source and a commercial product that have much of the same functionality. However, the commercial product has a different audience on the defensive team, and the open source one is on the offensive team. That to me is really unique in that sense. And I'm sure there's open source products and projects that maybe outside of cybersecurity have a similar kind of dynamic, right? But I think that's a really cool formula, because you're still supporting an open source community. They're using it for red teaming, and then the commercial version are the folks on the enterprise. Dude, that's gold right there.
Yeah. So the future of the products is merged code bases, enterprise features you gotta pay for. Everything else is available in the free software.
But having said that, I mean, I almost feel like Metasploit is kind of similar, right? Like if you're buying Metasploit from Rapid7, you're probably you could be using it more for blue team purposes, whereas red teamers not so much today. We use Metasploit maybe for certain things or components and modules and stuff like that. Not even, I don't know, most red teamers I talk to don't. Do you guys use Metasploit still on red teams? Any components, features, functionality?
Maybe once every 2 years.
Okay.
Very, very limited. Very specialty like type of stuff, like telnet password brute forcing or something ridiculous like that.
Okay. So very specific use case modules for Metasploit for red teams, right? But that would be kind of a similar analogy.
Yeah. Now, what I would also say about the future of the product is we introduced support for Azure, which is a word that is very loaded.
Support or Azure?
2 years ago.
Which word?
What's that?
Which word? Support or Azure?
Great question, Larry.
Both. But I saw somebody tweet out that Azure Active Directory is neither Azure nor is it Active Directory.
Okay.
When I say Azure, I guess what I mean is the suite of cloud computing services that have been offered by the Microsoft Corporation, let's say.
Wow, right? That's a blanket statement in
Azure AD, Azure RM, Office 365, etc. Right?
And yeah, even when you say those words, there's so many different names for all the different components that have changed so many different times.
Yeah. So we're like what I'm focusing on, in the current, like at the present, is getting our attack path visibility for the various Azure services as comprehensive as possible. So what that means is, like, if I compromise an Azure user, what do I do with that? Like, how do I know what privileges that user has? How do I know which privileges matter? Why do they matter? What are the other objects that those privileges can be held against? How do those privileges work? What are the parallel privilege systems that exist? It is a beast. Azure is a very, very complicated system. And here's what I'll say about Azure is that today, Azure has actually been out for 10 years or so, but really the enterprise started adopting it in earnest. From my perspective, I would say about 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And so like now, our customers are still like adopting Azure for the first time and starting to migrate applications and services into Azure. So the time to be involved in Azure research is right now, because there is a whole world. There are worlds of opportunity for research in Azure that are totally untapped. There's a really, really straightforward way to interface with the various Azure services. It's basically all API driven, which is good and bad. But we're making our attack path model for Azure as comprehensive as possible. But what we've also realized is you can have trust relationships between on-prem domains, right? This domain trusts this domain. We've known about that for a long time.
Yeah, we've had that for a while. It was always touted as a bad idea, but people did it anyway.
Yeah. We've had it. What year is it? 2022. We've had it for 22 years. 23 years, right?
Did it exist in NT 351 for workgroups, or was it until NT? Was it and? Maybe? Now I'm asking questions which really don't matter today, but I'm just genuinely curious now.
It might have.
It's historical reference. Yeah.
I was still hacking AOL at that time, so I don't know.
Hey, Mr. Lee Neely has joined us. Lee, welcome. I know you had a previous meeting. Thanks for joining us, my friend.
Quite the conversation. Andy, you just confused the heck out of me with your, free versus enterprise, where they have a different focus group. Usually it's you want to do that same job better, come send us a truckload of money.
Check. Right.
Yep. So regarding that, I'll also say, like, most of the people who we go into sales conversations with tell us that Bloodhound Enterprise is underpriced. So take that for what it's worth.
So get in now before Andy and company raises rates. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just remember, like, I remember Carlos Perez telling me stories about, like, 2000, 2001 about, like, domain trust relationships and his experience.
Yeah.
So I feel like at least 20 years we've had that.
Sure.
But I say that because, like, we've had that for a long time. We also know that there are trust relationships that you can create between on-prem AD and Azure AD.
Well, hold on. I want to go back to that. You knew Carlos in 2001?
Oh, no. He told me stories from
back in the day.
From back in the day.
Yeah,
back in the day. Yeah,
I see.
Yeah.
I miss Carlos. Have you talked to Carlos? I
haven't talked to Carlos.
You mentioned Carlos. We miss Carlos. We love Carlos. He's an amazing person.
I love Carlos. Yeah, I love Carlos. Yeah. Some of the best international travel I've done has been with Carlos.
If I were to travel internationally anywhere, it would be with Carlos, and I would be safe.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, you'd be so safe.
Right.
Yeah. We now know that there are, people have known this for a long time too, but there are trust relationships between on-prem Active Directory and, Azure Active Directory, vice versa, etc. But for me, what I have been thinking about for the past year, and what I'm going to start doing a lot of more research into in the near future, is all of the various explicit and implicit trust relationships that can exist between identity providers of any type. So think about, on-prem AD synchronizing password hashes up into Azure AD. Okay, that's a trust type.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
But also think about like workload identity federation, where an Azure Active Directory service principal can be authenticated from the context of a GitHub action ephemeral virtual machine without a credential through OpenID Connect.
Oh, fuck me.
And all of the other various platforms that can create those trust relationships.
You were telling me about this, Andy, right? Like, there's
pardon my French, but good God.
Yeah. Like, there's some weird stuff you're looking into in Azure AD and some of these, or Azure and some of these permissions that occur. Are you doing a presentation somewhere, or you're working on some research on this, right?
I was going to do a talk at Black Hat USA. Mm-hmm. I say that as if it was a thing that was going to happen. I was rejected from speaking at Black Hat USA on this topic, so I'll try to submit a proposal for Black Hat Europe and then for Echo Party in Buenos Aires as well. So I haven't spoken about it yet, and I don't have anything on the calendar yet to speak about it. There is a lot to reveal there, and the various identity federation and trust technologies that exist. Microsoft interfaces or supports almost all of them. Like, that's the Microsoft way, right? Is like your third-party payroll application speaks this really weird authentication protocol. Guess what? So do we. So you have no reason not to use Active Directory in Windows. So in Azure, you can use almost all of these like new, emerging, or existing technologies for identity federation. Here's what's even scarier is, on-prem to Azure AD, to set up that trust relationship, you need to be the highest level of privilege in both IDPs. So you need to be domain admin and you need to be global admin, or the particular role that has the power to do this.
But that's just the way you establish the trust between two identity providers. That's the initial, we trust each other, highest level permissions, right?
Yes. However, and so I would call that an explicit trust relationship.
Yep.
That the God tier admins of both platforms should know about, because one of them must have been involved in setting it up. However, there is another kind of trust relationship that I call an implicit trust relationship. For example, federated workload identity from a GitHub repo to an Azure AD service principal. You can do that with just having control of the service principal. So being an explicit owner, being a cloud app admin, being an app admin, or having one of the MS Graph app role assignments.
That sounds just like but that sounds more like an OAuth trust.
Sure, but I think the effect of that is one IDP, the Azure AD tenant, has trusted that the other IDP has protected the, let's say, security posture of the ephemeral virtual machine or other resource that is allowed to authenticate to the Azure AD tenant as that service principal.
Right. And I'm saying even though is like another bad example of that, right? Where I have my Twitter account and I use OAuth to say that this application has this level of access to my Twitter account, but that application or its provider becomes compromised. Therefore, all of the permissions I've granted it to my Twitter account, I've now handed over to an evil bad person.
But
what you're saying, Andy, is this same or similar trust relationships exist in Microsoft's Azure with other providers in a similar manner.
And
in every provider.
Every provider.
And it also sounds like you don't need to have God mode
to do it,
to enable some of this type of stuff. You need to merely have access to some service principal to be able to make
it. So I think for me, what that means is, most critically, it means attack paths that can traverse IDPs, that can hop from one IDP to another, that the admins or the security admins of each of those IDPs don't know about.
Right.
Or don't know how to audit for, or don't know how to measure the impact of.
Because they haven't been involved.
Don't know what to do about it.
They haven't been involved, and nor do they need to be.
Sure. So you talk about like, SolarWinds, you talk about like, supply chain compromise, like whatever, right? So like, I think that's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And those attack paths, they are being created right now. They exist. We are finding them on our assessments and for our BHE customers.
Is this like the valet key for your car? Is that a fair analogy? Like you can unlock my glove box, but you can totally steal my car with a valet key as opposed to the regular key?
Yeah. Maybe I could offer a different analogy. This is like a bridge into the island of Manhattan, where you're not just giving New Jersey your valet key, which you should never give anybody from New Jersey anything.
Especially not a valet key.
Yeah. You're not only making
from
that
people from New Jersey is going to be epic now, Andy.
You're not some of the best people I know are from New Jersey. I love New Jersey. Well, I'll never skip an opportunity to
now you have to say that.
Talk shit. So
for the record, my wife is from New Jersey. So
you're not only like creating this explicit trust relationship from the state of New Jersey to the island of Manhattan, you're also creating this invisible, implicit trust to the rest of North America that you can't see because you don't have access into that foreign IDP in order to find out what other IDPs have they trusted, what have they trusted, et cetera, et cetera,
all the states that border New Jersey and that they border them and that they border them and that they border them. And then you get all the way to California.
It's it's that transient trust, right? And Andy, I was telling you a story earlier, right, about I sat a few cubicles away from the person, Steve Carmody, who founded the Shibboleth Project, or was one of the founding members of the Shibboleth Federated Identity. In the university I worked at the university at the time. In the university context, it was universities would trust each other in an identity sense, right? A university would trust each other in other sense, in networking and internet too, and all that stuff, right? But from an identity perspective, you had University A, University B. They were doing a joint collaboration project. Maybe people from University A would travel to B and go, well, I need to work with my peers. I need internet access. Well, my identity from University B is trusted in A because we've implemented this federated identity. To your point, Andy, do the God mode admins of each university know everything about that trust relationship and are able to validate that trust relationship down to the user permission level to grant that trust? The answer is probably no, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure right now the answer is definitely no. And so, there are these attack paths that are created that's, some adversary can discover and exploit, but also it means that there is this really, really sneaky backdoor opportunity for adversaries that, maybe I create a service principal, maybe I abuse one that already exists, and I create this OADC connection to this random GitHub repo. Is the admin ever going to find that? Maybe, maybe not. Do they know to look for it? Maybe, maybe not. Do they know about the 10 other, federated identity relationships that don't require global admin to configure? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not.
That's amazing. Don't give too much. I mean, I do want the exclusive on this particular topic. I'm not going to lie, but don't give too much away because I want to see you present this at a conference and maybe come back and talk more about it in more glorious detail, Andy, because I think this is great stuff.
I'm sitting here thinking that Andy could produce a for Dummies book, Federated IDP Security, or I Have Your Keys because you shoved them in my hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you left them on the sidewalk and you left a copy of your keys on every sidewalk in America as well.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Andy, amazing conversation. I'm so glad you came on the show. It was so much fun.
Thanks for having me.
You. Yeah.
You need to come back, and it took too long to get here.
I know, right? Both those things. But I do have 5 questions left. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I'm ready.
3 words to describe yourself.
Practical, stupid, experienced.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Icicle.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Oh my God, how did I get here? I'm not good with computers.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
Hackers.
Yes. Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional,
Dead,
or otherwise?
Fictional or otherwise.
2 people to be my parents.
2 celebrities.
Yeah, really? I
2
mean,
celebrities.
I think Andy phrased it correctly.
Yeah.
2 people, fictional, whatever. 2 people to be your parents. I mean,
Carl Sagan.
Okay. They don't have to be people.
Carl Sagan.
They can be.
They don't have to be what?
They don't have to be people either. They can be whatever.
Fictional.
Aliens, whatever.
Yeah. I would say Carl Sagan and my own mother.
Whoa.
Very nice.
Cool.
Andy,
I would pick her again.
again, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It was nice having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Had a great time. As he raises a glass.
Raises a glass.
Yeah. Cheers.
Awesome. Cheers.
Hacker
Coming up
Planet.
next, security news. Stay tuned.